everyone. Welcome to the New View. The New View is a group of mature women. We've been getting together, meeting for about 3 years, and we started having conversations in the beginning of COVID, and they've gotten deeper and deeper and evolved into this regular meeting that we have every week, and we invite guests often. And today, we're very honored and excited to have Coleen Rowley as our guest. Um, I first met Coleen many years ago through Dan Ellsberg, and she was a whistleblower for the FBI around intelligence leading up to 9/11. And we've also discussed, she ran for Congress also, and is like us, one of the people that are critical and aware of the propaganda around COVID and other issues. So, Colleen, if you want to add more to your introduction, oh, and Ben Cohen's up in arms network of people trying to um, not, all the trillions that we spend on militarism to divert to give that back to, education, healthcare, basic needs. And we could solve all of our problems that way and more. So take it away, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you. I'm also in a local group called Women Against Military Madness, and it's also a group of mature women. In fact, the founder died at 103, I think, few years ago. Survived COVID at 101, and then died at 103. And it's about a 45, maybe 46, 47 year nonprofit. So when they're talking about going after all these nonprofits, and WHAM, Women Against Military Madness, acronym is WHAM, is on the list, even though it's 45, 46 years nonprofit. I'm in that, and I'm also in the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity and the Sam Adams Award, which is something I'll talk about initially just because Diane came to our last award in Washington when we gave the award posthumous, and we've been giving out this award for 24, 25 years now. And we're going to give the award, if anyone is near Raleigh, North Carolina, on January 7th. The award this year is going to Anthony Aguilar. So it's posted on Consortium News, and there's a play that night that Ray McGovern and Anthony Aguilar are going to be in. It's either readings or a play, and it's called My Name is Rachel Corrie. And then following that play on January 7th, it's like a double thing. Then there's going to be the award to Anthony Aguilar, who, if you don't know, is really, when we talk about Smedley Butler and people who have, seen the light and the error of their prior ways, being duped into doing terrible things, admitting it. And as more and more people, I guess this is where the hope lies, because yes, more and more people, you see more and more kind of coming around. Well, he was at one of the Gaza humanitarian centers when the people were struggling to get a little bit of food, and then the Israelis would shoot them, and he saw an 8-year-old child shot in front of him, and horrible thing. But he's been very active since then. When he came around, a lot of times, like Danielle is a great example. Once people do come around, you can't stop. They just continue, which is the good news. So spread the word. I'll maybe send a link to this event, and maybe it could be added on or something to the video. Raleigh, it's at what's the name of the theater? I forget the name of the theater, so I'm not sure if it's connected to him or not, but it's a theater in, not sure I'm going to be able to come this year. I'm going to try, but this is what I'll talk about. This is what I've been trying to, it's really a challenge, really a challenge. But I spearheaded a lawsuit, which I loosely entitled Minnesota Taxpayers Against Genocide. And initially, we were copying the California lawsuit. Well, the California lawsuit got immediately dismissed. The attorneys got cold feet because they thought the judge was threatening them when they filed a California. I don't know, Norman Solomon was part of it a little bit. But this was in the northern part of California. Way over a year ago, they filed this lawsuit. Well, but we found out, even though they got dismissed and everything, we found out a few of the mistakes along the way. And just because people don't know about these things, I took constitutional law, and actually in all of the criminal procedure of constitutional law, this is what I did for 13 years. I taught constitutional law to FBI agents and police officers, because if they do something that violates the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, Fifth Amendment, right against coerced interrogation, and right to attorney, cruel and inhumane, basically the Bill of Rights. If they find out that a government officer violated that, you lose the evidence. You don't get punished yourself, but your evidence gets suppressed. So if you went into a house and searched it without a warrant, you would have everything you found would be suppressed. So I taught this for 13 years, constitutional law. But even I haven't made a full and complete study of every. So when we filed this in May of May of this year, it's about eight months now. 8 months ago in May, we filed a lawsuit in federal district court, and we were asking to be certified as a class action. Now, the problem, I didn't know this, you can't be a class action unless you have a licensed attorney. You cannot do this pro se, which I think is unfair. It's very unfair that you have to pay a lawyer lots of money just to call for a class action, to be certified as a class action. You can't do it on your own, because pro se plaintiffs exist in a lot of arenas. So I don't understand why this is, but somehow they came up with the rule. And we sued eight of our congresspersons on Ilhan Omar, and both of our senators, which is Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith. And then we sued, on top of our congresspersons, we sued the prior Defense Secretary Austin and the current Secretary Hegseth. So there's like 10 or 11 defendants. The only reason we didn't put Ilhan Omar is because we were suing, because this was the vote in April 2024 where they voted to give $27 billion to Israel when they knew there was a genocide already taking place. The International Court of Justice had said it's plausible genocide. Amnesty, like 30 or 40 human rights organizations, maybe more than that by now, had written wonderful documented studies. It's a very easy case to prove genocide, because the Israelis are not hiding their intent. They said it from the outside. We're going to annihilate them. We're going to show them. I mean, this was all. So South Africa had an easy job. They just had to compile it. And again, it's hundreds of pages long, showing genocidal intent, etc. So
Excuse me.
But then
excuse me,
you had
Coleen.
our Congress.
Coleen,
Yes.
point of information. So did Ilhan Omar vote no on that bill, and that's why you're not suing her?
That's right. She was the only one in Minnesota that voted no. And, you know, she's been, of course, against the genocide. And now Trump is going after her and others, going after Massey and Ilhan Omar and a whole bunch of people. If you're not with the program, they're going to go after you. Which is again, if you're trying to figure out who's telling the truth, look for people not with the program. And they must be right about something. They must have some truth on their side. So anyway, we filed this in May, and then a couple months go by, and then we get a call from the chief of the civil division. And I was amazed because I thought for sure that she was just going to be very disparaging of us, because that's what happened in California. You know, we always think of California as so liberal and everything. Well, no, the judicial authorities, you know, were terrible there. He threatened the lawyers. I mean, just for filing the lawsuit. I mean, really bad. So I kind of expected that would be the similar. And, you know, she treated us with respect. And she says, well, you know, I gotta notice you that I'm going to file a motion to dismiss. And then I had a chance on the phone, and I thought, well, you know what, to get something out of this, I'm going to, you know, law school as you did. And, you know, we got lectured by the law professors and the law deans about our respect for the rule of law. I can't tell you how many of these boring things we said. Your utmost loyalty must be to the rule of law, not to, if you're a defense attorney or a prosecutor, your top loyalty has to be to the rule of law. And I said, after a while, you start believing it, that there is such a thing as the rule of law. I gave commencement speeches myself to law schools after that. You know what? This is really bad, because we're looking at the whole rule of law with a Damocles sword above it, you know, and basically it's all being evaporated right now. And, you know, I don't know, I on the phone, I can't tell if any of that resonated or not, but she filed her motion she was nice. I put it that way. She was nice. And she filed her motion to dismiss a week later. And then we got a chance to write up this, I don't know, it's about 40, 50 pages of, you know, I have not done law school. I never practiced law. I just went into the FBI. Out of law school, I went into the FBI. I passed the bar exam, but to be a licensed attorney in a state, and I passed the bar in Iowa, which doesn't help me in Minnesota, because it's every state's their own thing. So I'm not a licensed attorney in Minnesota. And even in Iowa, if I went back to Iowa, I'd have to go through about 400 hours of continuing legal education or something. So this was very difficult to write up a legal memorandum explaining why genocide is illegal and it's unconstitutional. Now, this should be obvious that it's illegal and unconstitutional because it's the worst crime imaginable. It's the worst crime imaginable, annihilating an entire people. It's what we said would be, quote unquote, never again. You know, well, okay, now it is happening again. And so anyway, we wrote this up. And in the course of doing this legal research, and I had an 82-year-old vet for peace who does not practice law anymore, but years ago he did practice law in California, and he was helping too. And he discovered one of the better things about that we're grasping onto. But we found out that you can't sue congresspersons because of the so-called speech and debate clause. So does anyone, unless you follow the Robert Menendez prosecution and how difficult it is, even when they find a extremely corrupt senator or congressman, and taking gold bars, you could eat. The speech and debate clause is so broad that if Turkey or some other country came in on the floor of the Senate and handed gold bars to Robert Menendez, and he walked up to a microphone and said, "Thank you, Turkey, I will do anything for you," we could not prosecute him. The government could not prosecute Robert Menendez. And he's actually argued this, by the way. It didn't happen on the floor of the Senate. He took the gold bars in a different place. And maybe that was his downfall, but for his lobbying. So it turns out you really can't sue congresspersons because the speech and debate clause is even a civil lawsuit. It says they shall not be questioned, ever questioned. Why is that? Well, the reason for the founding fathers putting in such a broad speech and debate was back in England, the king using prosecutions. So when they started writing the Constitution, they knew that was a big problem of the king going after Parliament. So they put in this broad protection. Now, the problem, though, is Congress should not be protected either. As much as the king should not be protected for doing wrong, violating the Constitution. If a government officer in the executive branch violates the Constitution, yeah, there's a couple of ways of suing them. But I think it should be the same thing with Congress because they can do the same things. Anyway, we had to change and try to amend our complete complaint when we found out that we couldn't sue them directly. And we switched it to asking for declaratory judgment. And this goes back to the very first, I know I'm giving this little legal lecture here, that first, it maybe wasn't the first, but it's very legal decision in Marbury versus Madison. Even people who know about this one because John Marshall, the head of the first Supreme Court justice, said if the executive violates the Constitution, the judicial branch gets to, quote unquote, say what the law is. That's why we have a third branch of government. It's because of this Marbury versus Madison first decision, and it's been hailed. It's been hailed through the decades, through the hundreds of years now, as the genius. It was a genius thing because it's how we get the checks and balances between the three things. So we're going back to Marbury versus Madison and asking for merely for a judge to review the facts and the law and declare that you voted and your two defense of a genocide. And I'm actually surprised more districts, there's 100-some districts in the United States, and nobody's tried this other than California, which got shot down immediately, and then us. And, we're taking heart in the fact that 8 months later, partially because we got a stay during the shutdown. So during the shutdown, the case was stayed. And now it has come back, and we filed our amended complaint, and we're waiting for the government to put in another motion to dismiss. And this is why I don't know if I can make it to North Carolina, because this thing could come in any day. And we have 10 plaintiffs. We're all pro se. We don't have a licensed attorney representing us. So we're all doing this on our own. And it's but there is supposed to be, I'll stop with the legal lecture. I'm just going to tell you one more part about this. Gill, who was the guy who did helped with the legal research, found out that if you go all the way back to the Supreme Court in the 1800s, when John Marshall was the Supreme Court justice, another justice, Joseph Story, have you anyone ever heard of him? I think I'd heard his name before, but I never, but anyway, Joseph Story, he was the youngest Supreme Court justice, and he was nominated by James Madison, the father of the Constitution. He wrote in his commentaries that you can't raise taxes for a foreign country. Now, does anyone know this? It's in another clause in the Constitution called the Tax and Spend Clause. Yeah. And in the Tax and Spend Clause, and then you go Story in 1820s, he said it's unfathomable that you would ever raise money for a foreign country, let alone a foreign country's genocide. So the thing is, it's really sad that it's such an uphill challenge when this shouldn't be that hard. And, I think legally we do have we have good arguments. It's just that right now, for a long time, the United States has, that tax and spend clause has been ignored. There was one case, I think in 1968, where taxpayers objected to the funding of a religious school and claimed that it was a First Amendment violation. And they held that the taxpayers had standing to sue for a violation of the Constitution. So that's the one that we're using on tax and spend. But the government, our government, has been taxing and spending Americans to support foreign, even terrorists, world, let alone foreign countries. So it's innovative, but maybe history will find out that this was correct, and I think it's worth doing. I'm trying to think if there's one more thing here that I was missing about this case. Chuck, the commentaries of, he wrote about this in 1820s or something, Joseph Story. But when FDR had the New Deal, remember there was a series of cases and they tried to challenge, even Social Security, they tried to challenge that in the Supreme Court. And guess what they tried to use? They tried to use the commentaries of Story about improper taxing and spending. Tax and spend has to be for, quote unquote, the general welfare or common defense. General welfare or common defense. Arming a foreign country or sending money to a foreign country is neither for the general welfare of the United States or the common defense. It seems like this has gone into forget. But anyway, I thought it was worth doing. It kept me from volunteering to go on another flotilla this last summer. I might have otherwise gone, but I'm so up to my eyeballs with this that I can't really take off. So anyway, that's the latest little thing I've been up to. And I will send a couple of links afterwards. I'm working on an op-ed about this, and I don't know if I'll get it placed because right before we get the motion to dismiss, we have a little time, but I think it could come now any day.
Well, it might be a good point to open to questions and conversations. It's all very interesting, and we'll look forward to your piece on it because we really should try to get other states to do what you're doing. And so you are giving us a really excellent template for these kind of lawsuits against the tax and spend and all that you just said around genocide. I want to know about your views on the rule of law, which seems to me something that was invented by certain U.S. power structure, this phrase rule of law, compared to valid, authentic international law, which would include the Nuremberg war crimes laws that came out of there. So it seems like the United States has decided they've come up with a whole new set of something they call rule of law that they used to clobber people with that has never really been clearly defined. Do you share that view, or how do you see it?
Yeah, the essence of law, real law, is it's got to be reciprocal. So real law, not regulations about what kind of garage door you can have and safety, but real law is just a basic understanding that allows civilization. Because, and murder is a great example. I mean, when you murder, in my emails, it always comes out, Moses didn't go up the murder, thou shalt not murder, set in stone. It's set in stone. It's basic. You can't murder. I've spent 24 years in the FBI thinking that we're not allowed to murder people. But you know what? Slowly, little by little, in this empire, we have gotten so full of hubris and heady that we think we can enforce law on others. They can't murder us, but we can murder them. And so, and this has happened across the board, and law goes up in smoke. There's a famous quote from Brandeis in 1920s in the Olmsted case, the Olmsted dissent. And he said, if government becomes the wrongdoer, then all chaos breaks loose, because they are, for good or for ill, they teach everyone. And this is why actually you see mass murder right now. Mass murder, which is more than mass shootings. It's the, drive into a crowd, they can get a knife and go out and stab, or an axe. They can get a bomb, a car bomb. So we are seeing this eruption of chaos in the United States. And I would attribute some of this because the government says, well, we can bomb that boat off of Venezuela.
Right.
You know what? We can call them a name and we can kill them and bomb them. Well, what do you think a young man who can't get a date, they call them involuntary celibates, they're a little bit odd, so they think that they can't get a date. You get mad at your job is mean to you, they're bullying you in school. I mean, any number, or get cut off in traffic. So the people now are taking this lesson, this cue from our leaders. And this is what happens when all law breaks down. And law, again, by its nature, has to be reciprocal. It means that everybody has to be bound by the same law. It can't just be, otherwise we have that king can do no wrong. And the king back in the day, they could murder people. That's why they tried to eventually get the king under control with the Magna Carta and stuff. They tried because, back then rulers could, and you see this around the world, but it's happened in the United States. The rule of law has broken down. And I'm not talking again about minor things. There's always been inequality because of being able to hire attorneys. So obviously, if you're a defendant and you have enough money, you can either bribe your way out of it, or you can hire a better attorney. So there's always been that problem of some inequality, and the selection of juries. There's problems. There's always been problems in the justice system. But I will argue, never as bad as now. And I think international law in the United States says, no, unipolar power. This is why we're doing what we're doing, which is to try to gain unipolar power over the rest of the world. Of course, it ain't working, and they are becoming more desperate. And as they become more desperate, it's more dangerous for everybody. Far more dangerous for everybody in the world when an empire and trying to keep its control over the rest of the world. But the law. So, for instance, the United Nations and the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, if they make a decision that we don't like, we go after them. Francesca Albanese is sanctioned. They take all of her money. They're threatening. I think they've done this with the International Court of Justice too. So international law is already much more like it's not as set in stone as the domestic law, but even our domestic law, genocide under American domestic law carries the death penalty. So here we have
To whom?
a crime.
Coleen, to whom? If we have a law that carries the death penalty around genocide, can you give an example of how that would work so we understand
If you're
it?
found, well, the only way it would work is if you're from Africa and you somehow got caught and brought to the United States and we tried you for genocide. Yeah, you could be subject to the death penalty. Any place in the world, especially the places we don't like, and they brought you to the United States and under an American court, you were tried for genocide. Yeah, you could get the death penalty. However, you know, and things that we never hold ourselves to the same standards. It's a constant double standard. And the constant double standard completely erodes, again, back to Brandeis, it completely erodes the rule of law. So you can't have double standards. People think you can't, because it totally erodes it. But that just shows you how serious a crime it is that it carries the death penalty. And yet, in California, a judge practically threatened the attorneys who brought a case like that. Can you imagine? Because Israel, I don't know what,
Yeah. Wow.
people are so brainwashed.
Marilyn had her hand up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Coleen. And I have so much admiration for your group working on this lawsuit. And even though getting the declaratory judgment sounds like it, but just getting that out there would be so, so powerful. So I'm pushing for you, got it. What I wanted to say is when you say murder, everyone agrees murder is against the law. I just want to point out that capital punishment is nothing other than state-sponsored murder. So if anybody believes in the Ten Commandments, they should oppose capital punishment. It's literally state-sponsored murder. There are other things you can do. But I just want to also mention what just boggles my mind is after World War II and the Holocaust, as the years came on, there was more and more, as people realized all over the world what just happened, such outrage, and people were horrified, and how could this happen? And here we are, similar types of actions are being taken against a whole population, and people can't say they don't know because it's being live streamed on social media. And where's the outrage? Where is the outrage among so-called civilized country? It's just absolutely breathtaking that, well, this is okay. We're going to pretend it's not happening. It's okay because these people were experienced atrocities 80 years ago. They can go ahead and do it again. I mean, it's just utterly breathtaking to me that there's the lack of outrage among leadership, and it points to how corrupt the entire system, with a very few exceptions here and there in certain parts of the world among certain leaders. Among the broader populations, there is outrage, but among the seats of power, there's so little outrage. And it all boils down to me, the way money has become a tool of death and killing and genocide. The way we use money is so completely wrong, needs to be completely overhauled.
Diane,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That was a great point, Marilyn. And I think also, well, we're being conditioned to accept it and to normalize and all the propaganda and everything. But the question I have, or the comment, from what I understand, what they've been talking about lately, that we sort of changed law to the rules-based order in terms of changing the propaganda and the frame and the way, the mindset. So can you talk about that and what the term rules-based order And if that makes sense to you, that the frame has been changed from rule of law.
Yeah, this is what Chomsky and many people have said. When you have a term that somehow becomes, not welcome term, or you need to change it. Remember, was it Blackwater? And then they changed to X. They changed their names like 3 times.
Yeah.
I don't remember now. But that's the rule-based order is exactly what I just said. We want to give the orders, and you better follow them, because we're the ones, we're the ones that law has to be reciprocal. It has to be reciprocal. You have to hold yourself to the same. The Nuremberg speech by Robert Jackson, when he's handing out these death penalties, he makes a famous speech. It's called the poison chalice. And he says, it is a poison chalice. He goes, we're putting this to our own lips. We're putting this poison chalice of a really draconian punishment for committing genocide to our own lips. Well, of course, that's long been forgotten, that we would ever hold ourselves responsible. And in the Nuremberg principle, the main one was the supreme crime of launching a war of aggression. That's the main crime. It's not torture. It's not, and it's not these other things, other war crimes. Because the supreme crime is what carries the rest with it. Once you launch the war of aggression, all of these other crimes follow. And I used to argue this with the human rights organizations, like even Amnesty, because if you go back to the Iraq War, the first Iraq War, Amnesty International was supporting the Kuwaiti girl, the 14-year-old Kuwaiti girl, who claimed that they had gone in to topple the incubators, and she was coached by the CIA. And Amnesty ran with that. Human rights. They ran with it, and it was used as a pretext for that first Gulf War. Then when you get to the later wars, a lot of the human rights organizations said, well, we don't care about wars of aggression. All we care about are war crimes. And I even argued with Amnesty International people. At one point, there's a really bad director of Amnesty, Suzanne Nossel, who had been kind of a neocon. She was a Madeleine Albright protege. She became the United States director of Amnesty. And when we were in Chicago during the NATO things, they put up women in burqas, and it said, keep up the good work. And it was Amnesty. Amnesty paid for these big posters that were on buses, stations, and stuff. And it was a woman in a burqa. Why? Women's rights. We had used that pretext of women's rights, and that's why we have to fight in Afghanistan. Well, I think now they more or less have seen the error of their ways, because a war of aggression. And the United States is now, it's Venezuela and maybe Nigeria. I mean, we just can't be stopped. And again, we get normalized to it. We get normalized. They bombed Nigeria on Christmas Day, I think. And right. I told somebody, and people just kind of shrug. Oh, well, another country. Well, what else is new? It's just, and of course, Venezuela, you can't help but become and Diane will tell you, when you're exposed to something over and over, you are going to become desensitized to it. And you're going to become desensitized when you look around and everybody is doing it. There's some old, I don't know if it was ethics lessons or something, where everybody in the class is cheating. Everybody else in the class has the answers except for you. And you have a chance now to get the answers. You know what? Most people say, why should I, even if I know my stuff, why should I going to ace this thing because they all have the answers. And that's a desensitization to cheating and the scandals at West Point, in the FBI, by the way, people had the answers. I mean, why? Because everybody's doing it. And, even those COVID shots, everybody got the COVID shots because everybody around them, it's like that pressure, and you become desensitized to. Anyway,
your conscience becomes desensitized. You go into avoidance. You don't want to face the truth. So it's a choice between avoidance or the strength and courage of moral integrity to follow what deeply we know is true and right as human beings. It seems that choice.
Well, I have a before we shift, I have a question back to that.
Let me finish one more question. Right. Oh, okay. Then let's Diane. But just to consider, what do people care about? If they're desensitized, what do they care about? Because if people care about anything, they can be assisted in seeing how it connects to everything, and then how to go with what they care about will unravel all the lies and untruths. Go, Diane.
Yeah. Who came up with the term rules-based order, and when did they start using it? And what is it actually? What rules are they referring to?
Is it written down?
I don't know who came up with it, but it came up between, was it before Trump or after his first one? I want to say before. I think it was mostly the neocon group, the PNAC neocon group that came up with it. Somebody in that project. And it goes back to that full spectrum dominance, and it's the same thing. It's not, there are no rules for the victor. There are no rules for the person on top. It's only rules for the people who have to below. That they're, dominance. Think about it. I mean, if you are, this is why the psychopaths seek dominance, and it's more, they don't. Even the worst psychopaths who are the serial killers, it's not for any reason except dominance. They get some high out of the domination itself. And domination has a lot of benefits. It does have a lot of benefits. So, these people at the top of our government. Now, what Alanna said is correct. There's blowback. The thing is, all of these, when you start to violate these very basic common standards, you're going to find there's blowback. All religions have something like reap what you sow, karma, what goes around comes around. They all have this recognition that doing really bad things that violate basic law are going to have some ramifications on yourself. It's not just, murdering Iraqis and Afghans and Venezuelans. No, I honestly tie this now into our mass. Here in Minnesota, we had the shootings of 4 different state senators. 2 of them lived, and one died. Hortman and her husband died. It was 2 senators and their families is what it was. And the guy, we don't even know. It's not covered anymore in the news, so we don't know what's ever happened to him, the guy who shot. It's very strange. But, when that happened, then we had a school shooting afterwards. And I wrote another article. I've written at least 4 articles about the mass violence in the United States, which has never happened before. These kinds of car bombs and stabbings, and a lot of it is former military people. I went all the way back to Timothy McVeigh and John Mohammed and another guy they were like the worst, they're considered the worst forms of domestic terrorism. McVeigh, bombed the Oklahoma federal building. Mohammed shot 17 people in DC. And they were all former military. and of course, McVeigh explained that he had been on that road where they were bombing all the people and whatever. And so you're seeing this high proportion of going to go shoot people. And it's not just the military, but there is a high proportion. It's not just military, because people are being conditioned this way. Our culture is showing us that the heroes are the American snipers. And so people, you know, and it's not just guns. Like I said, it can be a lot of different things. And this is part of the blowback. And it's a reaping what we sow. I know it sounds a little too moral for most people. They don't think this is the case. When I will give this talk to the average person, they'll look at me and like roll their eyes. Like, oh my God, are you trying to preach something to me about? No, they don't believe it's the case, but it is the case. It is. This is blowback. The PTSD, all of this, it's all blowback from violating basic law and one war of aggression after another, and telling people that, you know, you can kill civilians on Venezuelan boats, being the last one.
I'd like to ask, make a comment and then see what you think it has to do with the totality of what you are presenting here. Having, you know, experienced the anti-Vietnam War movement, you know, in my prime, having been, you know, a very traditional boomer who thought that we had actually ended the Vietnam War, that we thought that our efforts had succeeded at changing the world. And I think that, you know, in listening to where we are now, coming from that experience, and then also looking back, you know, 20 years after it, and doing enough research into the music scene and what was really going on in the 60s, and MK Ultra, and the whole movement with acid, and the whole complete, corruption of the anti-war movement. And in fact, to this day, boomers have been charged with ruining the peace movement, when in fact it was actually totally taken over and run very much by obviously many of the same people, I think, who are running things today. But I bring it up because of this evolution of illusion. You experience something, you think it's real, and then you look back and discover it wasn't what you thought it was. And I think that we're now coming to kind of the head of this idea that we've been told a lot about what we've lived through. Some of us were more personally involved than others, but we're now still realizing, even though I actually was directly involved with the anti-war movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement, and I still know I had no idea what was really going on. And so now when I look at things, I'm not surprised at all that we are no further along in grasping it. And I'm beginning to think it has a lot to do with the concept of the simulacrum, which is the idea that, what is the narrative that was created about all of these things? And that becomes the reality that people believe. And that narrative is built on and built on. And what we're discovering is that a lot of that narrative is not real. It's a simulacrum. And we're trying to pick through what could have been real even within the simulacrum. I lived it. I was there. I saw something. What is reality itself? And I have a feeling that this is part of what is emerging now. It's dripping with contradictions. I think your point about the law and the rule of law, when you look back at what happened during World War II with the throwing all the Japanese Americans in concentration camps, and then discovering that it was a fraud, a total fraud, and nothing was done. I realized the Japanese Americans probably got paid a little money for the horrors that happened to them, but the idea that this is anything new. So now we're faced with what's called a genocide, and it's being differentiated from war. Well, maybe we shouldn't be thinking of war as separate from genocide itself. Maybe all war is genocide.
Yeah, thou shalt not kill.
And that's our problem, meaning the separation, we accepted the idea of the just war, and that became a loophole to now lead us right to the genocide itself, which it always was. Okay, so I think these are, the ideas that are popping through my head, trying to piece together my personal evolution with these ideas. And so, I hope that contributes something to the conversation.
It does, because just war, as a just war theory, now often called the responsibility to protect, which is why we did Libya and everything else, goes back to the corruption of Christianity under the Roman Empire. St. Augustine created just war theory. How do you get these pacifist Christians to fight the Roman wars of domination? These very fundamental corruptions, I think we need to really look back at. If we had true Judeo-Christian ethics, thou shalt not kill, no Christian would be paying taxes into the war system. They'd all protest. They'd all be, but it became only charity. Oh, I love you. Here, have a piece of bread. Not that fundamental justice around sharing. God created, the Creator made it all, the koina, for us to share for our livelihood. Roman law, dominium, legalized land acquired by conquest and plunder. And Coleen mentioned Magna Carta. Magna Carta was how the barons wrested some power away from the king, but it was to their benefit. And Magna Carta was embedded at the time of the enclosures, when the hundreds of years of enclosures, but the Magna Carta 1215 document had nothing to do that's going to help those enserfed people whose land were enclosed. There was no people's rights, no people's economic human rights whatsoever. So the power shifted to the barons class. And it might have even been worse than had it been under that sort of balanced feudalism under the king. So we can't even look at Magna Carta anymore. And our democracy cracked from the beginning because it didn't have any economic human rights, just political. It's always been ruled by the rich in the United States, frankly.
The only thing I will say, it was a little start. As you said, wrested a little power. These things have gone in even the Revolutionary War. The plantation owners like Washington and Jefferson, whatever, they didn't care about the serfs. They didn't care about it. They cared about themselves. And so different interests. But, at least they learned a little bit of a lesson looking at the king's powers. And then, they took another little step forward. Benjamin Franklin, I would say he's one of the better ones of the founding fathers, but he had some influence, and it's always little by little. And I will just say, learning the lessons of history and going back to Vietnam, you see John Kerry, who threw his medal down. This is a terrible war. And then becomes one of our leading warmongering people for power in the world. So this can happen with human beings. Human beings are very difficult to last any length of time. On the other hand, again, I'm a cynic on human nature, very cynic, because of all of those psychology experiments, whatever. It is quite easy to manipulate big masses of people through tribalism, through the group superiority, the Esch test, the Milgram, the Zimbardo, and the monkey test, or whatever. It's very easy to manipulate. You can't manipulate everybody. And, if you're over 65 on COVID, 90 to 95% of everyone in my category got that shot. And it wasn't that they didn't have to, because they didn't have jobs or whatever, but they were, again, the societal pressures and, of course, lies, but manipulating people is not really good at manipulating others, psychopaths. And I think I've said this by Kevin Dutton of Cambridge or Oxford. I mean, psychopaths, people call them sociopaths who rise to the top. That's just a nicer term. It makes it seem nicer because serial killers. But the serial killer is just a small, tiny percentage of all psychopathically talented people. And psychopathically talented people dovetail, the traits are personal charisma, ability to persuade, perseverance, courage and risk-taking, focus, ability to read others. All of those things that are psychopathic traits are, guess what? Leadership.
But whoa, Coleen, those are all good traits. Yeah, what are we, this little group of six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, who are aspiring non-sociopaths, but aspiring to use power with compassion as goodwill? What are we to do? So let's ask your visionary self you talked about all these little steps that have been made against the king and so on.
There's plenty of other good leadership traits that are not on that list for good leaders. I just want to remind us, there's traits of humility, wisdom, compassion, lifting up the strengths of those around you, delegating responsibility. Let's not forget those leadership traits. And
that's the feminine coming forward.
That our psychopathological leaders, they are serial killers. Sorry, folks, they are serial killers. People got to get that into their brain.
Yeah, Carol. There's a
Carol,
famous.
You're muted. Carol, you're muted.
I said we just have to recognize too. You need a balance. So any trait to an extreme becomes something very negative. And you have to find the right balance if you're gonna serve humanity and not cause more suffering and havoc.
Yes.
Things too is power. On my end of my power corrupts. Everyone knows power corrupts. It attracts the worst and corrupts the best. And that corrupting the best at the end is the problem. We have that story about Jesus resisting the devil, who says, I can give you power and wealth. And he says, no, I don't want it. But that same thing is power. You really have to be wary of it. Now, I'm not in any position, and most of us aren't, but if you ever understand about power, when somebody like Ma'am Danny is a good example. A lot of people, Carrie is a great example. Getting power alone can really change a person overnight. And you think that person is, these things aren't born in you. It's a lot of it is the environment and everything else. And people sucking up to you, be careful if people start sucking up to you and trying to give, forget it, get away, I don't agree with that, whatever. But because that's the problem. They're trying to manipulate you that way. There's a lot of ways to manipulate people. And power is one of the ways. Power is a manipulating thing.
Yeah, I think the best people are incorruptible. So I don't think power corrupts the best. And also there's like a higher power or power to empower other people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think it's also problematic to ascribe these qualities to the feminine, because men, empathy, humility, I think it's cultural, and how males are socialized, and I think these are human qualities. And we have, some of us have grandsons. Men can be the most romantic, passionate, humble. So I don't think that I think the problem is under patriarchy, that these qualities are described as masculine, and that all the tenderness that males have to exclude that. They have to put that in their shadow. I have a presentation on that. That's all. I think these are human
Well, I
qualities.
think it's important that we, and another group that I'm working with now, it seems to be we're coming down to wanting to focus on power, the whole discussion around power right now. So maybe we're beginning a new charting a new course here. But let's, Coleen, finishing statements. Your preferred vision for the future would be what?
Well, I just keep hoping we can get back, to a semblance of rule of law. If people did understand that what goes around comes around, I do think people would be better equipped to try to restrain what's going on now, which is law. It's essentially lawlessness. And so anyway, I don't know that what's going to happen. I hope that we survive. I hope we don't get a nuclear war. I mean, it's not much to ask for 2026 that we can avoid a. What? It's right on the line all the time because these people are crazy, and they don't get their way. They get the what's it called, the Hannibal thing, where everybody, not Hannibal.
Yeah.
Forget it, but it's like kill everyone.
Right.
And that's what a mass killer.
Solomon?
Hannibal. That's the same as a mass kill. A mass killer knows that they are going to be killed. It's suicidal, homicidal. They know that there's very little chance they're going to come out of this. But you are so at your end, and all you see, tunnel vision, is, you know what? I see this from all around me. I want to be American Sniper. I want to be the hero. And this is my way of salvaging my soul or something. But that is where you get into the danger of pressing the nuclear button. I think Hitler in his bunker, if he had pressed it. That's my opinion. And so that's the problem when things go that badly for people in power. And again, you got those psychopathic traits that people have risen up to the top of these things. And even if they didn't have them, I do think environment corrupts you to a great extent. I don't think, and the women right now are many times, maybe it's because we're still in a quote unquote man's world, but some of the women, Van der Leyen and oh my God, all these Callis and all these people, they're as ruthless. They're trying to be more ruthless. And I used to use Condi Rice and Hillary Clinton. They're trying to be more ruthless than the men to compete in the man's world.
Yeah. Your lawsuit is very important, and I'm sure we're very grateful that you're doing it and that we got to hear about it, and we want to keep supporting you. And you're also working with a lot of veterans for peace and intelligence, for former intelligence people for peace. Can you envision when you're presenting your case there in the Minnesota court, or however you get to present it, that the military people come in wearing their uniforms with whatever pins they have and standing there with you all for this? Yeah.
We're crossing our fingers, but I think, reality is that we probably will be, get dismissed. A judge will dismiss it. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
But you want to get it out. Come up with whatever they say, great if they say, but if they dismiss, you're going to want to get your voice out there about, hey, justice was not served. That's been your whole point today. We don't have law of justice anymore. Right. So we have to get that back. The people of goodwill have to develop some good power. So I'm just saying, because something I've been thinking about a lot lately, if you were to then make a public press conference statement, stand there with the guys and women in military uniform with their on their chest, that they didn't even have to say anything. They might want to, but you'd just be showing a certain kind of power that's wanting to be with the people and not with the power structure as it is. Just, can you imagine how that might be?
But also, I think Alanna's right, but there's things that you should say, like what you discovered about in the Constitution, and just make that statement really loud and clear. Get that out to the entire country real fast, if you can. I mean, it'll probably be censored, but it's still so powerful that it could go viral via the Peace Network. Especially if you make it short and sweet, you know, make it
Get it being videotaped.
I think the hardest thing isn't getting it down to one paragraph that everyone can understand, and getting that paragraph out.
Good.
If you can.
You get in touch with us, whatever point in your process with this, so we can help get the word out in our networks that we have and spread the word, because it's important what you're doing. Okay, sorry, Liz.
No, I just wanted to make a quick comment in light of what was just said about saying something. And I already originally made my point about really putting out the idea that there is no such thing as a just war, and that all war is genocide, period. All right. I think that is a strong, clear idea to get into people, to help them. And I think it will really matter to the military people who are aware. Also think that we have to confront MAD, mutual assured destruction, as a guidepost to getting us here, not saving us. And we have to think about that. This idea was put out as the perfect way to limit the probability of a nuclear war. And what are you saying, Coleen? We are more scared right now that it could happen than we've ever felt our whole lives. And we go back to the bunker days in the 50s. So this to me are sort of some clear ideas, and we have to think about how we got here was one day at a time, one idea at a time that we thought made sense, and now we know it didn't. And the reason we know it didn't is because we're in this mess right now talking about it. And so it isn't just now. These things didn't just come out now, and they didn't come out just in the last 20 years. I think, we can go back. You might have to go back to the Spanish-American War and the first corruption of the justification for war in 1898, and then move forward. Every single war in the 20th century effectively was a false flag. Every single major war. So these are clear paths, but if we don't want to be actual steps. And I said, my suggestion is there is no thing as a just war. Confront the Catholic Church with its idea, and there is absolutely, we were guaranteed to get here based on mutual assured destruction. And I'm sure Daniel Ellsberg would agree with me on that.
Okay. Anyway, this was great, Coleen. First of all, before you were saying that there is nothing worse than genocide. So I think there is something worse than genocide, which is nuclear war, omnicide, which is nuclear war. And regarding just war theory, maybe 20 years ago, around the invasion of Iraq, I was read something like, if you say that war, the question is whether war is just, but whether it's wise. So that, I mean, I agree that there's no such thing, there's no just war, but even if you justify war, or if you believe in just war, or if you can answer all the questions, make a case, not an honest case, but even if someone believes in just war, the question is it wise? And that I contend in the spirit of Transcend US, which I'm in the process of founding, and Johann Galtung, and that there's no situation in which you can't figure out something better than war. No matter what's going on, if you apply the right thinking and the right disciplines, you can always figure out something better than war. But people always come back to but like, what about the Nazis? We had to go to war. So that sort of gets people to stop thinking. So just some thoughts.
Well, right now we have to confront the fact that The Iron Mountain discussions actually revealed, the ones that happened during the Kennedy era and finally were revealed in I think, the 1970s, basically came to the conclusion, these are all these officials talking about how to act. And what they came to the conclusion is because of the belief that the only economy that would work is a war economy, they really couldn't come up with anything better than slavery. So I think that, Alanna, this is where you come in, new ideas about how to think about the economy as a peace economy that actually produces and continues to produce an economy that works for people and that is based on peaceful coexistence, obviously is not a reality for a lot of the officials who have gone through this process, going back, to the Iron Mountain Report in the 1960s and 1970s. And we are still living with that thinking, I think.
Not anymore if we have anything to do with it, right? So let's see. Thank you so much, Coleen. We could go on another few hours, but we're aware that we'll want others to watch this when we post it. I will simply say thank you. If anybody else wants to final remarks, thank you to Coleen. And then I'm going to end the recording, but we can stay on those who want to a little bit longer.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Coleen Rowley, for being with us so much. And everybody else. Bye-bye.